I want to begin this episode by telling you how I came up with the idea for this episode. So, I opened my Instagram one day, and the top post was something about total bases and Shohei Ohtani. Total bases is a statistic that doesn't get talked about much, but it can be seen in other stats, and it really can tell you about the offensive performance of a player during a season. And simply, you add up points for each type of hit. A single gets you 1 point, a double 2, triple 3, and home run 4. In 2024, Ohtani tied Barry Bonds for 16th place all time with 411 total bases in a season. So I went to the list of all-time season leaders, and this is a funny stat because some of the names you think are going to be there in the top 20 or even top 50 are not, like Ted Williams or Mickey Mantle. Ted Williams had a .406 batting average in 1941. He led the league in batting 6 times. He hit 30 or more home runs 8 times. But his highest season total for total bases, 368, puts him at 120 all time. Mickey Mantle won the Triple Crown in 1956 with a .353 batting average, 52 home runs, and 130 RBIs. And this feat gets him only number 88 all time for most total bases in a season, with 376. A total bases record requires you to tick all the boxes, or to hit a ton of home runs, like Barry Bonds did in 2001. But let's look at this. Bonds hit 73 home runs that year. Ridiculous. He hit well over 300, and this got him only 16th on the list of most total bases in a season. Now, other names you might expect to see there are there. Babe Ruth is number 1, Rogers Hornsby, Lou Gehrig. But then I saw a name I didn't recognize. Chuck Klein, number 4. The 4th most total bases in a season all time. This guy I'd never heard of. Now, I'd like to think I have a pretty good catalog of major league stars, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And I probably saw his name before, but the memory must have faded. So, okay, he's number 4. I logged this information and continued scrolling down the list for most total bases in a season. And there he is again, Chuck Klein, at number 9 for a different season. And then as I keep going, I see him a third time at number 24. So this guy is in the top 30 3 times for most total bases in a season in the 1920s and 30s. Who is he? The more I dug into Chuck Klein, the more explosions went off in my head. Beyond the total bases record, Klein hit over 350 4 different seasons. He won the Triple Crown, a feat accomplished only 28 times. He hit 4 home runs in one game, a feat accomplished only 17 times. Since his 445 total bases in 1930, no one has tied or topped him. That's nearly 100 years of holding this record. But where did Klein go in the baseball memory palace? Where do others go like him? Where do others like him go? I'm obsessed with certain ideas and concepts, and my wife will tell you this is true. I'll bring up a question or a huh moment, and she'll give me this look, and I'll say, oh yeah, I bring this up a lot, don't I? Only every 5 or 6 months, she'll say. And by now, some of you listeners might be used to me repeating certain ideas. And one clear winner is my obsession with how much history can be covered in the span of 2 or 3 human lives. But another recurring theme for me is who gets remembered and who doesn't. And what does it actually take to be remembered 20, 50, or 100 years later? The answer is that it takes tremendous presence or contribution or some twist of luck that locks you into the history books. But most extraordinary people are not remembered a year after their death, let alone 50 years later. So I thought I'd start a series of those, at least in the baseball world, who have slipped through the cracks. Tonight, the fascinating and overlooked life of Chuck Klein, and how a kind act by, of all people, Richard Nixon, left me in a strange emotional space. You're listening to the Midnight Library of Baseball, where there are no loud noises, no jarring music, only nostalgic, thought-provoking, emotional stories about baseball. I'm Ben Orlando. Unlike a lot of his contemporaries at the time, Chuck Klein did graduate from high school in 1923, but his grades were too poor to consider any kind of higher education. So he started to work and soon found his way into a steel mill, where hauling metal all day turned him into a powerhouse. And after long days of exhausting labor, Klein played baseball. This routine carried on until 1927, when he was spotted by a scout. Unfortunately, Klein broke his ankle and was out the entire season. But he came back in 1928, and toward the end of the season, he was brought up to the Philadelphia Phillies. Here's one of the strange things about Chuck Klein. As he moved into an arena with much harder competition, his statistics not only improved, they exploded. In 88 games with Fort Wayne in 1928, Klein had an average of .331. In 275 plate appearances with the Phillies in 1928, Klein finished the season with a .360 batting average, 11 home runs, and 34 RBIs. And let me preface his stats for the 1929 season by explaining that Klein began the season in a hitting slump. From writer James Lincoln Ray, quote, "The Phillies were beginning to wonder whether their future superstar was turning out to be a dud. Klein persevered, taking extra batting practice every day, and soon began to improve." End quote. Klein improved to the tune of a .413 average in May and a .448 average in June. He was performing so well that reporters started calling him the Babe Ruth of the National League. When I saw this, I wondered if this was a common thing, a rookie coming up from the minors and just destroying it in the major leagues. There's not a lot out there on this phenomenon. I couldn't find a term for it. There are a lot of articles about why it's so hard to transition from the minors to the majors. Obviously, the competition is much harder. And you have the media and tens of thousands of fans. More pressure, higher stakes. There's a long article in Grantland that details why it's even harder now. But there's also a piece in a local Pennsylvania newspaper about the 2023 crop of rookies who did really well. And the explanation here was that AAA baseball is trying to mirror a lot of the coaching and research available at the big league level. So minor leaguers are exposed to the same teaching methods. Also, people said that coaching's better and resources are better at the major league level, which allows for rapid improvement. But Chuck Klein in 1928 didn't have any of these advantages. He stepped right up and crushed it. So what was going on? Well, some people prosper with the adrenaline rush. They get even more focused under pressure. And it's possible that he felt relief that he'd made it. There also aren't high expectations for rookies, so there could be a freedom in that. Whatever the reason, Klein was like a meteor that crashed into Philadelphia. Especially in light of the fact that 1929 was his first full season in the majors, Klein's statistics are staggering. He hit .356 and set a new National League record with 43 home runs. But as James Lincoln Ray explained in an article on Klein, the 1929 season, like many of Klein's seasons, was shrouded in controversy, and it had to do with where Klein was playing. But we'll get into that in a bit. In Chuck Klein's second full season, he hit .386 with 40 home runs and 170 RBIs. And this is not the season he won the Triple Crown. From Ray, quote, in his first 5 full seasons, Klein averaged .359 with 36 home runs, 46 doubles, 139 RBIs, 132 runs, 224 hits, and 396 total bases per season. He truly was the Babe Ruth of the National League. End quote. Amazingly, Klein was traded after winning the Triple Crown, the only time this has ever happened in Major League history. But why did it happen? From Ray, quote, Klein's team stunk, and it was almost broke. The Great Depression hit the city hard, and as unemployment climbed, fans stopped coming to baseball games. Attendance at Baker Bowl dropped from 299,000 in 1930 to 156,000 in 1933. The Phillies were on the verge of bankruptcy. End quote. This is definitely one of those what-if stories, because if Klein had stayed in Philadelphia those next few years, his statistics could have been astronomical. Still, he continued to put up good numbers after being traded to the Cubs. And then, a few years later, he was traded back to the Phillies. So just to emphasize these feats, over a 5-year period, Klein averaged more total bases per season than Ted Williams or Mickey Mantle ever achieved in one single season. Klein won the league MVP in 1932 and the Triple Crown in 1933. He hit for the cycle twice, something done in Major League history only 3 times. And that's when you get a single, double, triple, and home run in one game. He hit 4 home runs in a game, something only done 18 times. And according to Ray, during his 4 home run game, Klein came within a few feet of hitting his 5th home run, something that has never been done in Major League history. And, oh, by the way, he was also a phenomenal fielder who threw out 44 base runners from the outfield in 1930, a record that stands to this day. He also led the league in stolen bases in 1932. As a position player, he dominated every offensive and defensive category. And in this 5-year stretch, or perhaps any 5-year stretch, it can be argued that he was one of the best athletes who ever played the game. At this point in the show's development, I can start to include advertising, but I'd prefer not to, so I'm considering different options. I'm starting a Patreon page where I'm going to offer exclusive interviews from the selections that I've included in past episodes. And as always, your donations are really helpful. You can donate at midnightlibraryofbaseball.com, and you can also write reviews and ratings on iTunes. So I appreciate any support you can provide. Okay, back to the show. When we take a step back and try to figure out why Chuck Klein was so successful, so dominant, we actually have Klein himself give some feedback. Klein credited his years in the steel mill, flinging heavy steel bars and beams, his strength. So if anyone out there wants to hit more home runs, seek out your nearest steel mill. Klein was also humble about his success and said, quote, "I find it very difficult to realize that I, Chuck Klein, the chap who was working in a steel mill 3 years ago, am the same fellow who led the National League in home runs this season. Isn't that a laugh?" End quote. After his incredible 5-year run, Klein had one more great season in 1936. Then he had some good seasons over a major league career that spanned 17 years. But when he became eligible for the Hall of Fame, his numbers apparently did not light any fires. From James Lincoln Ray, quote, "Klein's detractors far outnumbered his supporters among the sports writers who voted for the Hall of Fame, as evidenced by the fact that he garnered only 2.5% of the vote in his first year of eligibility in 1948. Over the next 15 years, Klein never even came close to induction, his best year being 1964, when he got 28%, a far cry from the 75% needed." End quote. When it comes to public recognition and awareness, one reason for why Chuck Klein didn't become a superstar and was not remembered was timing. His best years took place during the Great Depression of the 1930s. The 1920s are seen as the golden age of baseball, and really the golden age of the United States. Everything was going well. Business was booming, and people could afford to attend ball games. They could buy more newspapers. They can even purchase the new exciting technology called the radio and listen to games that way. But what happened during Chuck Klein's first full season? The stock market crashed, and suddenly everything took a back seat to surviving, to finding work and supporting your family. Baseball was still there as a nice distraction, but as the New York Times reported, attendance dropped 40% between 1930 and 1933. If Klein had debuted in 1921 or 22, maybe he'd be remembered differently. But when it comes to Hall of Fame voting, something else was at work. Now, the controversy that people throw in his face is that Klein played in the Baker Bowl, a major league field where the right field fence was 280 feet from home plate, so fairly short. But as Larry Shank explained in an article for MLB.com, there were other major league parks with short fields. Yankee Stadium had a fence only 295 feet from home plate, and nobody held this against Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig. And the Polo Grounds had a right field fence only 258 feet from home plate. And with that 280-foot right field in the Baker Bowl, there was also a 60-foot high wall you had to hit over. Another argument is that it wasn't like every player on the Phillies was smashing home runs and doubles and triples. No one on the Phillies or in the entire league was doing what Chuck Klein was doing. Now, for me, the best argument and only argument that matters is that Chuck Klein was playing baseball in a major league sanctioned ballpark. This is baseball. Parks have different dimensions. If you disagree with this, you disagree with baseball. And apparently all of these Hall of Fame voters disagreed with baseball, which makes no sense to me. But this is what happened. Klein was rejected for playing by the rules, for performing outstanding feats of athleticism in a regulation ballpark. And almost as soon as he retired, things began to go downhill. Klein's health deteriorated almost immediately after he left the game, and in 1947, he suffered a stroke that left one leg paralyzed. From Ray, quote, according to his brother, Klein was in a semi-coma, almost unable to walk, could barely speak, and had great difficulty with his memory, end quote. And according to writer Greg Doyle, 3 years after retirement, Klein's marriage failed, his 2 businesses, both taverns, went under, and he moved back home. And it's implied that many of these social and physical problems were either caused by or exacerbated by alcohol abuse and poor diet. But after a serious downturn, Klein, helped by his sister-in-law, found his way out of the bottle and back to a semi-normal life, although he was still physically broken. From Doyle, quote, in those early days, Chuck Klein would hobble into Victory Field among baseball fans unaware that the man in his 40s, hunched over a cane, once hit 4 home runs in a game in 1936 and regularly outslugged Rogers Hornsby, Mel Ott, and Hack Wilson for National League home run titles, end quote. In his later years, Chuck Klein spent a lot of time with his nephew, Bob Klein. But despite his temporary recovery, he continued to decline and died of a brain hemorrhage at the age of 53. By the time of his death, he'd been forgotten by his city, his country, and Major League Baseball. The Hall of Fame voters dismissed his unbelievable achievements as the product of a short right field fence. All was seemingly lost until, on an autumn day in 1972, Klein's nephew, Bob, received an unexpected letter. What must Bob Klein have been thinking when he opened the envelope to find a letter from the President of the United States, Richard Nixon? This is what journalist Greg Doyle had to say about this unexpected document. Quote, Bob Klein received a letter on White House stationery from President Richard Nixon explaining that a journalist had recently asked Nixon to name his all-time baseball team. Nixon went on to write that, quote, on a quiet afternoon at Camp David, I did come up with a list. No team would be complete without your uncle's name, end quote. Included in Nixon's correspondence was a thick gold pamphlet with the presidential seal on the outside and names like Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, and Chuck Klein on the inside. Doyle continued, quote, 8 years later, the phone rang at Bob and Barbara Klein's home in Greenwood. It was someone from Cooperstown, New York, saying the Hall of Fame Veterans Committee, charged with reconsidering players no longer eligible for the ballot, had elected Chuck Klein for enshrinement, end quote. I've never been a big fan of Richard Nixon, from his policies and personality to his paranoid, sneaky tactics while in office. But honestly, when I first read about what he did for Chuck Klein and his nephew, when I read about this letter he absolutely did not have to send, I felt the tears sneaking their ways up into my eyes. I mean, it's a lovely gesture. As I was reading this account, I tried to put myself in Bob Klein's shoes. He was very close to his uncle. He must have loved and admired Chuck Klein for so many reasons. He would have heard all kinds of first-hand accounts, and it must have crushed him to see this great ball player neglected, dismissed by his community, and then to receive out of the blue a letter from the President of the United States saying, your uncle was a great baseball player, and I wanted to personally tell you that. I wanted you to know that he hasn't been forgotten. How amazing is that? So, at the end of this story, I find myself experiencing a great deal of anger toward voters who are supposed to support the fundamental structure of baseball. And I find myself with a new soft spot for Richard Nixon. Before we end tonight, I'm happy to say that listener baseball stories by popular demand are back. Tonight, here's John Barkin from Cleveland. John sent me a recording as kind of a letter. So here's John.
As the oldest and only boy of 4 siblings, I had a strained relationship with my father growing up. He was always working, doing his things, and had 2 rules for the kids, one for me and the other for my sisters. Of course, I hated that. But, and a big but, he gave me his love for baseball. As I was approaching my 5th birthday in 1953, my dad took me to my first baseball game at Old Municipal Stadium, then the home of the Cleveland Indians. There were no elevators, no escalators, just steps and ramps. We had to take the many ramps to get to the upper deck. As I emerged from the walkway, I witnessed the bluest sky, the greenest grass, and the whitest lines I had ever seen. It seems as if it took place yesterday, not 72 years ago. From that day forward, baseball and Dad were wove together. He got me into Little League, offered to buy me a glove if I got a hit in my very first game. And I got 2. Got my first Wilson glove. He played catch whenever we had a chance. He organized a game of running bases with the neighborhood kids on a regular basis. He created a baseball game that all the kids played at our house, which is hard to describe here, but trust me, we loved it. Then the 60s came and things got very tense between us. I went to college, got drafted during the Vietnam War era, served in the U.S. Army, came home, became a professional firefighter, and moved on with my life, including having my own blended family, but had my own son later on. I kept playing baseball during this time, even playing fast-pitch softball with a U.S. Army-based team in West Germany, then switched to slow pitch back home. Harbored some bad feelings about him for many, many years and could never reconnect. Then 1993 happened. Cleveland was moving into a new ballpark in 94, which was called Jacobs Field. So in 93, I had a chance to take my son to Municipal Stadium for his first game. So just before his 5th birthday, and almost 40 years to the day, I took him to his very first game and did the same thing Dad did for me, upper deck seats. We did the same routine as Dad and I did. Walked the ramps, walked the walkway over the lower deck seats, and entered the stadium boxes. As we held hands, Ryan, my son, told me, "Dad, those are the best colors I have ever seen." I asked, what did he mean, holding back tears as I say this now. He said, "So blue and so green, and the white is so bright." As the years went by, I played catch whenever I could with Ryan. I coached him for almost 11 years as he grew up. He and his best friend, who he played with up through senior year in high school, now coach little leaguers 8 to 12 years old, even though neither have kids of their own. And to further add to this story, I am now in my 8th year working for the Guardians/Indians organization. To say baseball is my passion is an understatement. My only regret is that the 3 of us, Dad, Ryan, and I, could never take in a game together since my dad died when Ryan was still young. Dad had retired and relocated to Florida, where he spent the last years of his life, apart and distance from me, sadly. Ben, I have shared your podcast with many, and one final note for you. I have my own professional driving service to keep me busy. A few days ago, while listening to your podcast, a passenger heard it, and since I had forgot to turn it off in favor of some quiet music, as the ride was ending, the passenger asked me what I was listening to, since he wanted to finish the episode and wanted to hear more. I gave him the link, and he said he's definitely going to follow. Ben, thanks again.
Thanks so much, John, for sharing your story. In episode 5, we'll take a look at another player who fell through the cracks.
Lefty O'Doul, who has the fourth highest batting average in Major League Baseball history, but this was a guy who was an unheralded humanitarian who went through life disguised as a baseball star.
Next time on the Midnight Library of Baseball. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergi Patkin and Ashot Danielian at Pixabay. Good night.